For a session presented by Mastercard, please welcome President for APAC, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at Mastercard, Ling Hai, in conversation with Skift Director for Global Strategy, Weier Parilla.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Ling Hai. Welcome to Skift Global Forum.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to kick things off today talking a little bit about our theme, which most people in this room know is travel's Great Renewal. Thinking big picture, when you think about the word renewal, what does this mean for the sector of travel?
Well, again, thank you so much for having me. When I think of this word, the word implies some sort of return to normality, but I actually think we're going to be returning to something very different. The world is not, it's going to be a new normal. It's not going to be the same anymore. I take a look at the data that we have, for example. Travel has recovered to the pre-COVID level. In fact, it's probably 20-30% above the 2019 level across all countries. The only exception is probably China, which is still slightly lower. But if you look at the behaviors, they're very different. I love to use this Taylor Swift example. Like, it's very hard for me to imagine this sort of behavior. For instance, I'm a business traveler. I would go to countries for a business trip. I'm going to Tokyo, for example, next week. And I would add on 2-3 days for personal vacation. Yeah? That is my typical behavior. And recently I was told by my sister, who lives in Shanghai, that her daughter, my niece, is actually traveling to Seoul just to watch a BTS concert and then come back to Shanghai. I would never do anything like this. But people clearly, I mean, depending on the segments you're looking at, there are a lot of people who actually travel for events and experiences. So Taylor Swift, you have probably all read about this, is a great example of this. If you look what she's able to do for local economies, something like, restaurants in the vicinity of the stadium where she performed, seeing 60 to 70% increase in sales and revenue, right? Just really astounding. So, like, my view is, what's the takeaway? Now, I'm not in the travel industry, I'm in the payment business, but we do see data from the travel industry. Like, if people ask me what advice would you give, I would say follow the behavior, right? The future is very difficult to predict. I use today's data or yesterday's data. I may be able to say, oh, these are the trends, but how long can you count on the trends? For the next 2 years, or is it next 5 years? I think that's very unpredictable, actually. So my view is, for anything, when you think about product development, when you think about creating new services, I usually think about following the behaviors and behavioral segmentation, right? Too often when we think about segmentation, we use demographics. We talk about gender, men versus women. We talk about age, right? Younger people versus older people. Those demographic attributes are good proxies, but they're imperfect proxies of behavior. In my own business, the way I think about segmentation, our teams think about segmentation, is we go after behavior, and then we create products that speak to these behaviors and allow people to self-select. What do I mean by this? In my business, you have cross-border travelers versus domestic travelers, right? Their behaviors are very different. You have people who do more purchases online versus offline. So why don't we just segment based on that? You may have a 50-year-old man and a 35-year-old woman. They look different in terms of demographics, but in terms of behavioral segmentation, they may belong to the same segment. So therefore, I think that's a much better way to think about innovation, product development, services development. Use behavior as a proxy, and then develop products to create that self-selection mechanism. So that's how I would think about it. So if you ask me, I think that's probably where we're moving now, especially with AI. I think there's a real possibility that you can customize down to the segment of one. Because I feel like my behavior is very different from other people, even if I may belong to some broader category of segmentation, but I am me. So if any company has the ability to really use analytics, I don't want to overuse the word AI, but if you use analytics to really understand who you're dealing with, and then create those customized offers down to the segment of one, then you really will stand out and win the competition.
Right. It's really about personalization, right?
Personalization.
Creating these personalized experiences and understanding the customer. So you mentioned this. You bring a perspective really of a global technology company that works with many industries, travel being one of them. From where you sit, what are the big trends in digitization right now? And how will these play out and impact the travel industry, both in the short term and longer term?
Yeah. Maybe, so again, from my perspective, I talk about two things. One, as things get more digitized, people no longer doing business face-to-face, I think the biggest one to watch out for is cybersecurity, safety security, because I think it's not just for our business in the payment industry or for financial services in general. Trust is so important. You breach trust once, people never come back to you. I think for the travel industry, it's the same thing. So that's probably one place we all need to stay very diligent, because with AI and social engineering, I mean, there's so much going on in terms of scam and fraud, right? In my business, I see it every day. As I travel around the world, that's what governments and banks talk to me about. I still remember last year, we did a conference like this, and my team recorded me in English, and then they use an AI software to turn me into speaking French and Hindi, like in 2 seconds. And when I asked my colleagues in the audience, they're like, yeah, Ling Hai, that's you, it's your accent, but you were speaking brilliant French and Hindi. I got really scared. I called my mother and I said, if you ever hear from me, like calling you, asking you to transfer money to me, don't do it, right? Call me back. We got to use some human intelligence here. But this is a real issue, fraud and a scam, and you see this in especially wealthy countries with an older population, right? So that's what Japan is talking about. That's what Singapore talks about. That's what Australia talks about. That's what the UK talks about. And I think in your industry is something you need to just like be very careful about. But let me talk about the other thing, which is probably much more important. I think in terms of a big trend in digitization, it's the emergence of the super app. What is the relevance for you? Well, let me maybe put it in the context of my own business, right? If you think about the super app, you think about like a Google or Apple, or in China, you would have WeChat and Ali or Alibaba, right? The idea is, like, I don't know about you, these days when I go out and shop, I don't use my credit cards. I don't use my physical cards anymore. I don't even carry my wallet. I use my Apple Pay. I live in London, so everywhere I go, it's contactless. I just tap. And very soon, an average consumer like myself don't even remember who he or she banks with. I don't even remember my credit card is with HSBC or NatWest or the Royal Bank of Scotland, right? RBS. I remember Apple Pay, the super app who has created, so or you can think of these as super apps, or you can think of these as the aggregators. In your industry, OTAs are the aggregators, if you ask me, right? The online travel agencies. So if you're at a hotel, if you're an airline, or if you're a bank, you got to think about this question. You start to lose your brand identity in front of your very consumers. And so how do you fight for that, right? Again, I put this in the context of a bank. If I'm HSBC, I want to be at the center of my consumer's life in that ecosystem. I want my consumers to think that I'm dealing with me, HSBC, not Apple, not Google, right? And it's a fair competition, fair fight, but how do you win this, right? When like in China these days, people wake up reaching out for their phone and look at WeChat. So WeChat is something you deal with 6 times a day. Versus if you're a banking app, I deal with it maybe once a month to look at my balance. So engagement is very important, because with engagement, you gain insights into your consumers' behaviors. I talk about behaviors a lot. And therefore, you can do better cross-sell, upsell. You can service them better, right? If you actually are able to turn the right behavioral data into insights. So that's something I would really talk about and bring this to your consciousness. And it's something we should all think about. How do you stand in front of your consumers, create the right engagement model, but create that frequency of engagement with your own ecosystem, whether it's a digital app or whether it's your website. and give them a reason. I do have a hotel app. I'm not going to name who it is. I don't want to annoy other people, but I do have a hotel app, and I use it a lot because they gamify certain things. I'm a points junkie, right? I travel a lot. I love my airline miles. I love my hotel points. And they created this thing to say, hey, here's your status. Here's how far away you're from getting a higher status. So they gamify some of the things and gives me a reason to engage with the app. I think those are great examples of how you should think about this. So that the punchline is, because of the emergence of the broader super apps or their ecosystems, you don't want to become just to be embedded in somebody else's app, or you become the link. You want to be something that's front and center in your consumer's consciousness. It's a challenging problem, but it's a real interesting problem to solve.
So it's a really good point, because I think one of the things we wanted to talk about is global payments and the difference that the differing methods of payments around the world. And this is probably one of the rooms of the most frequent international travelers on the planet, perhaps here today. So we're all really aware of how different those experiences can be if you're in China versus London. How is Mastercard helping businesses in travel adapt to these changing shifts, these ongoing shifts in payment tech?
Yeah. In the payment space, I start with something that's related to safety security. One thing that's very interesting, I'm sure you guys are all consumers, you're all making payments every day, right? Where there is exchange of value, there needs to be payments. So we have found that consumers do not want to make a trade-off between safety and security and convenience, right? They want both. I don't want to spend 6 minutes getting queried and typing in different passwords in order to log into a website. But on the other hand, a seamless, frictionless experience doesn't mean my credentials will get stolen or my account will get compromised. I want both security, safety. I also want convenience and ease of use. So as a payment network, we need to provide both, and we need to enable our partners in the ecosystem to do both. How have we done it? Tokenization is probably one of those examples, right? As you make payments, the issue is inevitably you're leaving a footprint. You're leaving a digital trail, a paper trail of your credentials, right? You're paying a merchant, they get your account number, they get your information. So the way is not just to delete data, because if you delete data, destroy data, you don't store data, you don't have analysis, you don't have insights anymore. So the idea is to anonymize the data, right? Tokenization, the idea is it's a one-time only data, it's a one-time only credential. If somebody gets hold of it, they cannot use it, right? But we know it's tied to your main bank account number. We know how it is tied to you. And so that is a great example of providing both safety, security, but also the ease of use and convenience. I mean, I assume a lot of you use contactless payments or Apple Pay. I mean, it's a great experience. Also think about a lot of the apps, right? That has to do with your industry, whether it's an airline app, whether it's a hotel app, or ride-hailing app, whether it's Uber or Lyft here in this country, or Bolt in London where I live, or Grab in Singapore. When people finish a ride, they don't even need to think about payments, right? It just happens because you have a card on file, you have a token on file. Again, here, safety and security is such an important thing. Again, one bad experience, one instance of breach, people will not use it anymore. So for us, that's how we think about our business every day. I always tell people, payments are not about just moving money from A to B. That's the easy bit. The Mastercard secret sauce, our network, our franchise model, basically address several things. One is it addresses what goes wrong, what happens if something goes wrong. What if money did not get from A to B? Or what if A said, I sent money to B, but B said, I never got it? Or B said, I gave money to, A said, I gave money to B, but B never delivered any services to me, or didn't give me the goods that I'm looking for. We have a whole set of franchise rules around how we resolve these disputes. How do we reverse a transaction, for example? Also, when you use a Mastercard, when you're around the city, when you use it with a store, with a merchant, when you see our brand, you know our brand promise stands behind it. That is, there's a commitment to safety and security to the consumers, but there's also a commitment to the merchants that you are going to get paid, you will receive the money. So there's a whole set of things around, how we think about payments. And the point is we want to create a consumer experience that's as frictionless as possible. And I think that will be very valuable for the travel industry.
So it's really about increasing and supporting the partners, the travel partners, but also constantly improving the experience for travelers.
That's correct.
Well.
That's correct.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time, but I do want to ask one more very quick question of you. Looking at the next 12 months, very short and over the next year, what are your big priorities for Mastercard within this sector?
So number one, cybersecurity. Safety security is a big one. For those of you who follow us, you probably saw we recently made a huge acquisition in this space, right? In the dark web, there's a lot of stolen credentials. There's threat intelligence we need to gather. So we continue to build capabilities, but sometimes also through acquisitions, buy capabilities that will enhance the safety of the network. That's a big one. The second one clearly is around consumer insights, whether this is about using insights to drive loyalty. I know you all are in the loyalty business. Everybody wants loyal customers because acquisitions are very expensive. So you get the right customers, you want to make sure you keep them. And we use our data and analytics and our AI to help our partners in the ecosystem to enhance consumer loyalty, whether this is banks, fintech companies, or travel partners like yourself. And a great example I always give people is, we develop those co-brand programs with airlines and hotels. But the point is not just a co-brand programs that gives a good user experience, allow people to accumulate points and have a payment vehicle and a loyalty vehicle in one. But more importantly, the co-brand program is a great way for our travel partners to gain insights into consumer behavior. You see what consumers do with you on your airline, on your flights, with your properties. But with a payment vehicle, you get to see what they do outside your stores, off your premises, with other airlines. And that competitive intelligence has a lot of value. And so that's a big priority for us. We will continue to enable our partners to do that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great chatting.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.